On December 25, 1979, the Soviet army invaded Afghanistan. This intervention would ignite one of history's bloodiest wars. The Soviet Union sought to protect Afghanistan's socialist regime and maintain its influence in Central Asia. At that time, the Afghan government struggled to cope with internal turmoil and Islamist movements. The Soviets intervened in Afghanistan to prevent the regime from collapsing. The intervention led to the deaths of 15,000 Soviet soldiers, the loss of hundreds of aircraft, and the tarnishing of the Red Army's reputation for invincibility. The war severely strained the Soviet economy and set in motion the process that would lead to the collapse of the Soviet Union. In this video, we present a detailed account of the Soviet-Afghan War, both before and after the conflict. Afghanistan gained independence from the British in 1919 and established political ties with the Soviet Union. During the reign of Amanullah Khan, the Soviets provided Afghanistan with economic aid, military training, and equipment. Afghanistan's first air force was established with aircraft donated by the Soviet Union. In 1933, Mohammad Zahir Shah ascended the throne as a reformist king, fostering good relations with both the Soviets and European states. During World War II, Afghanistan remained neutral and later sought aid from both the United States and the Soviets to modernize. America's refusal to sell weapons pushed Afghanistan closer to the Soviet Union. In 1953, Mohammad Daoud Khan became prime minister and strengthened Afghan-Soviet relations through pro-Soviet policies. In the 1960s, border clashes with Pakistan shook Afghanistan's economy, prompting Daoud Khan to draw even closer to the Soviets. However, misguided policies and growing public anger led Zahir Shah to dismiss Daoud Khan. As Zahir Shah moved closer to the West and distanced himself from the Soviets, Moscow grew increasingly displeased. In 1969, Zahir Shah declared, "I am neither capitalist nor socialist. We will not be servants of any nation." In 1973, while Zahir Shah was in Italy for medical treatment, Daoud Khan staged a bloodless coup, seizing power and abolishing the monarchy. From Rome, Zahir Shah announced his respect for the will of the people and abdicated the throne. Daoud Khan's regime initially maintained good relations with the Soviets. However, disputes over Pakistan and his purge of socialists strained relations with Moscow. In 1979, Daoud Khan was overthrown in a coup and the Afghan Republic collapsed. It was replaced by the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan under the leadership of Nur Muhammad Taraki. Taraki's government introduced ambitious reforms granting women equal rights with men, limiting the power of landlords, and redistributing land to the people. These reforms provoked strong opposition among landlords and Islamist groups. In the summer of 1978, an Islamist uprising began in Nuristan and quickly spread across the country. Taraki's regime suppressed the revolt with Soviet assistance. In March 1979, a new uprising erupted in Herat. This time, the Soviets refused to help, and Taraki's government struggled to put it down. Faced with successive uprisings and a weak army, Taraki signed a military agreement with the Soviets. Hafizullah Amin, claiming the agreement left Afghanistan open to invasion, staged a coup, deposed Taraki, and had him executed. Upon taking power, Amin pledged loyalty to the Soviets, but Moscow suspected he was a CIA agent. By late 1979, Pakistan's intelligence service was secretly supplying weapons to the Mujahideen, fueling further uprisings. Amin asked Soviet leader Brezhnev to send troops, but KGB chief Andropov argued that Amin's loyalty was not credible. KGB agents reported that Amin was preparing to cooperate with China. Based on this, Brezhnev decided to intervene in Afghanistan. On December 25, 1979, Soviet paratroopers were deployed to Kabul. Their mission was to seize the Tajbek Palace and eliminate Amin. The Soviets named the operation Storm 333. At the same time, the 40th Army entered Afghanistan by land. On December 26th, Soviet special forces disguised in Afghan uniforms surrounded the palace. Amin ordered his guards not to let anyone approach. On December 27th, Soviet troops took full control of Kabul airport. The 40th Army captured Herat, Farah, and Kandahar. At 7 p.m., Kabul's communication lines were cut. Soviet elite units launched the assault on the Tajbek Palace. The fighting lasted all night. Most of the guards were killed. Amin was captured and executed. The operation concluded on the morning of December 28th. After Amin's execution, the Soviets installed Babrak Karmal as head of state. Kabul, Bagram, and Kandahar airports were quickly secured. Soviet ground forces joined together to complete the operation successfully. The Soviet presence soon reached 100,000 troops. Cities were under control. The Mujahideen, nationalist in spirit, quickly formed local militias to resist the Soviet occupation. These resistance forces, called Mujahideen, received support from the United States, China, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Libya, and Kuwait. The Soviets suddenly found themselves fighting urban uprisings, tribal armies, and Mujahideen forces. At first, the uprisings were concentrated in open areas and city centers, allowing the Soviet army to suppress them quickly. But the Mujahideen shifted the resistance to rural areas, adopting guerrilla tactics. This change inflicted heavy losses on Soviet forces. By March 1980, attacks against Soviet soldiers became widespread. Patrols were ambushed and killed in broad daylight by civilians. Soviet convoys were frequently ambushed in mountain passes and valleys. Improvised explosive devices planted along roads destroyed convoy vehicles. Red Army helicopters hunted insurgents, while Mujahideen hid in underground tunnels and mountain caves to escape airstrikes. Throughout 1980, 2,000 Soviet soldiers and many Afghan government officials were killed in Mujahideen attacks. After suffering heavy losses, the Soviets abandoned patrol duties in Kabul in January 1981, handing responsibility to the Afghan army. The Soviets focused on rural operations, sometimes raiding mountain villages to search for weapons, sometimes burning homes. These harsh tactics backfired, driving civilians entirely into the arms of the Mujahideen. By 1985, the Soviets had lost about 10,000 troops, while the Mujahideen lost 30,000 fighters. 80% of Mujahideen casualties were caused by Soviet helicopter fire. In 1985, the CIA began supplying Stinger missiles to the Mujahideen through Pakistan. With these missiles, the Mujahideen were able to shoot down Soviet helicopters and aircraft. As planes and helicopters were destroyed one after another, the Soviets lost air superiority. In this environment, Mikhail Gorbachev became leader of the Soviet Union. His first priority was to withdraw Soviet forces from the Afghan quagmire. Unlike his predecessors, Gorbachev pursued a more conciliatory policy with the West, meeting several times with US President Reagan. Failing to defeat the Mujahideen, the Soviets replaced Babrak Karmal with Mohammad Chamkhani, and later Mohammad Najibullah. The new president expanded the Afghan army to 500,000 troops, aiming to relieve the Soviet forces. From 1987 onward, the Soviets began training and equipping the Afghan army, gradually transferring responsibilities. In December 1987, Gorbachev announced that Soviet forces would begin a phased withdrawal from Afghanistan. The first 50,000 troops withdrew by August 16, 1988, and the remaining 60,000 by February 15, 1989. Thus, the nearly decade-long Soviet-Afghan War ended in 1989. In the war, the Soviets lost 15,000 soldiers, 118 aircraft, and 333 helicopters, at a cost of about $115 billion. This enormous expense severely burdened the Soviet economy and accelerated the collapse of the Union. After the war, Najibullah remained in power for only 3 years. In 1992, the Taliban captured Kabul, overthrowing the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan and establishing the Islamic State of Afghanistan.